Buongiorno, buonasera e benvenuti amici. My name is Vincenzo and welcome to my channel, Fountain Pen Therapy. I've got another beautiful pen to show you folks. Again, it's part of my Grail pen odyssey that I went through during the summer. Some people would say ridiculous, exaggerated, exorbitant. I say it was fountain pen therapy that will last me for quite a bit of time. Be that as it may, I have another beautiful Italian pen to show you. A pen that I purchased at the Aurora shop in Rome. It's been a pen that's been in my cart or carts, several pen retailers, if you will, for some time now. I never wanted to, take that jump and buy it. Figured I'd get there. But when I knew that I was going to Italy, I said to myself, Vincent, be patient. Once you go, you'll try to get it in Italy, the land or the country that it was manufactured in, and you'll be able to see it firsthand, etc., etc., etc. I got to tell you, the pen is this Optima O Sole Mio from Aurora, a beautiful pen. I like many things about it, but it did surprise me in many ways. In some ways, it also disappointed me. At the end of the day, I think I'm still enjoying this pen. So the objective of this review is to show you what the pen looks like, to give you my personal impressions of that pen. It's not going to be a normal review where everything's going to be analyzed to in a scrupulous way, but I will provide you with, I think what's most important, which is that nib, which is that writing experience. I want you to feel what this pen feels like in my hands, and I want to compare it to some of my other Grail pens and maybe explain to you why I think it is a Grail pen. Is it or is it not? Stay tuned. Here is my review of the Aurora Optima O Sole Mio. Okay, so a little bit of background on Aurora. First of all, the company was founded in Turin in 1919. So 1919, so that's more than 100 years, folks. So this is not a company that's just started out. It's led by the Verona family. This family has been involved in the writing instrument business for more than 4 generations. It's a company that sells not only writing instruments, but also luxury leather goods, watches, and paper, like several other major high-quality pen manufacturers do. It's on its website, its marketed values are a passion for beauty and style, along with a commitment to quality and refined detail. And in my opinion, that evokes the made in Italy branding that it has. That's a perfect description of made in Italy products. Excuse my bias. It's a Piemontese based manufacturing facility, and their facility kind of is a perfect mix between artisan craftsmanship and technology. In other words, some phases of production are managed by computerized systems, and other steps are performed through, the traditional methods used by master craftsmen. A little bit like the Delta factory tour that I've published on YouTube. You can see that there is a combination there. Not everything is done by hand. Some of the production process is obviously done by machines, heavy equipment, and even computerized systems. Now, in addition to that, you should note that Aurora, if you look at their pens, they're marked by a variety of materials, including precious metals like gold, silver. There's mother of pearl, there are rubies, and there are resins. In particular, the resin of this pen, the object of my review, the O Sole Mio, is what they call auroloid or auroloid, which is a cellulose acetate, which in turn is an acrylic, and I'm reading a definition, an acrylic variant intended to reproduce the depths of color and warmth found in vintage celluloid, but without the long curing period and manufacturing difficulties. That was explained to me by Nino Marino when I visited his factory. He explained to me that the celluloid bars that he have and that he purchased from the Delta bankruptcy, if you will, those bars have in fact been cured, and so they're in fact even more expensive, because normally a celluloid, you just can't manufacture it and use it immediately. There is a long curing period. So this material, from what I gather, gives you the benefits of celluloid without having to go through that extra step. And at the end of the day, I've got to tell you, that pen is just, or the O Sole Mio, we'll see that in a few seconds, is just a beautiful jewel. Now, Aurora has, yes, it's made in Italy, but it's achieved international recognition in more than 50 countries around the world. In fact, if you look at their website, they say that their exports represent 70% of the company's annual turnover. And Aurora has opened standalone boutiques in several shops, not only in Europe, but in America, in Asia, and the UAE. So at the end of the day, it is an international brand, and the quality pens that it manufactures are obvious. What's also very interesting is that, unlike many other manufacturers, Italian manufacturers included, Aurora is in fact one of the few companies that produce their own nib, thus offering customers the opportunity to choose their own writing style with a view to fine tailoring their needs. And as you can see on their website, they have several nib choices, which is, I think, always a plus. You're not stuck with Yowo nibs. They make their own nibs, and they make their own nibs successfully, I must add. Now, the particular pen O Sole Mio is a 14 karat solid gold nib. It has a black resin, and it has that auroloid orange barrel with gold trims. And of course, the O Sole Mio, for those of you who don't know, is Neapolitan folklore. It's a song that's often associated with Neapolitan culture, and the pen, I think, just beautifully evokes that folklore. And when you look at the pen, the Optima in general, it evokes, I agree with what's said in the website, there's a certain elegance and sobriety of a model, which probably, can be seen to be a model of the early 30s. So there's some historical modeling there as well. So there you have it. that is a brief description of some of the background material of Aurora. It's a great company, as this Optima o Sole Mio will demonstrate. And that's next. So here they are, and maybe I should take a look at the pen first, but I've decided that I wanted to show you some of the pens that I have that are Aurora branded. First of all, these two pens are I bought them as vintage pens, but they are actually still being sold, if you will. And let me just take look at my notes here. I don't want to get their names wrong. So what do we have here? Yes. Well, these two are referred to as the Megalano metal pens. Very nice. I have two different models in terms of colors. One is completely silver. The other one has a cap that's gold coated and silver barrel. It has this kind of a nib. Very nice nib, I got to tell you. Writes really nicely, and we'll take a look at that in the writing sample in a few seconds. So those are those two pens. The other pen, of course, is my Aurora 88. I thought it was a vintage, but it may not be as vintagey as I originally expected, because the same type of pen is being sold today. It is a piston filler, beautiful. I really love that nib, and we'll take a look at that nib closer. We'll compare it a little bit to the nib that I have in the subject pen. Of course, I have this moderately priced and low priced, probably the lowest priced pens in their collections, or one of them anyway, which is the Ypsilon. It has a steel nib, number 5 size, that writes beautifully. This one is a broad, and it's juicy and really thick. We'll take a look at our subject pen in a second. This I picked up in Rome as well, and it's a vintage P or 88P with that hooded nib. Very nice, very flexy or soft nib in that pen. We'll show you that in a few seconds. This is what's referred to as the Aurora. I have both the ballpoint and the fountain pen. Again, lower cost, student type pen. Very thin, and they call that the Aurora. This is the, what do they call it? The Ottantoto. No, that's, 1 second. Yeah, the classic resin Ottantoto. And it really has a nice nib there. Number 5, it is steel, I believe. Yes, it is. So it's really a cheaper version of their gold nibbed offerings, and there you have it. So that is really the extent of my Aurora collection, and as you can understand, I was so happy to add to it this O Sole Mio. So without further ado, let's get on with the review of the actual pen. Well, first of all, okay, the first thing that struck me when I saw it in person at the Aurora shop, and actually I had seen some Aurora pens initially at the Novelli shop in Rome, is how small this pen actually is. When you take a look at it on, in photographs, on retail sites, you get the sense that it is a much bigger pen, but it is not, folks. It's a really chunky, but on the smallish side. Just to give you some indication of the size of this pen, let me compare it to some other pens that I would say are Grail pens that are in my collection. And we'll take a look at that. You've seen already the 88, and it's much smaller than the 88. As you can see, it's significantly smaller than my Pilot A23, my Legrand, which is really a 146 Mont Blanc, just as small as my Sailor 1911, and a little bit even smaller than this Omas Extra. So as you can see, and compared to this Delta Dolce Vita 2.0, which is not even the oversize, you can see that there is quite a little bit of a difference there. So that's the first thing. I can't say that I'm totally disappointed, but I was disappointed at the size when I initially saw it and started to question whether or not I would actually get it. But of course, when you get into the pen itself and you start to see this beautiful material, the chatoyancy of this material, the pen feels expensive. The other day I received a pilot, not an FA nib, but one of those Falcon pens, if you will. And the first thing that struck me is how light it was and how cheap the quality of that resin was. That's not the sense you get with this pen. It's a little similar to what you feel when you put a 149 Mont Blanc or even a 146. You can feel the quality. The finials are quite simple. They're kind of rounded but flat on both sides. That clip is a classic Aurora clip. Works very well. It's very, it's stiff but springy at the same time. And I love this center band. It has Aurora, Italy on it with kind of a Greek, ancient Greek motif on it. Two kind of different, one flat or more stylized flat gold, and the other more of a shiny gold, if you will. So one is a little more matte, and that contrast is beautiful. It has another gold rim or band here at the bottom. The pen is, of course, a piston filler. It has a very nice, generous ink window, beautiful flare. The pen holds in your hand very, very comfortably. That's one of the key features of this pen, is that it is so comfortable. And I would say to you that it becomes even more comfortable when you post the pen. So as small as that pen may be, I think it was meant to be posted. And when it's posted, it gives you the sense of a much bigger and girthier pen. Now, on that resin, we can see, I'm not sure the pen picks it up, but there is some writing there. Let me just turn it around so I can read in Fabbrica Aurora Italiana, so penne a serbatoio. In other words, it has a piston filler. Okay, it's all in Italian. Beautiful, beautiful ink window. Writes even more beautifully. We'll get to that nib, but as you can see, this is a 14 karat gold nib. The nibs from Aurora, I understand, are all made in-house. And we will see how this nib performs in the writing sample in just a second. So all to say that this pen is an absolute joy to write with, and is worth every penny. And I really appreciate that it is finally a part of my collection. Now, let's get to, without any further ado, I'm not going to give you measurements and go through all of that. I think you can find that on your own in websites. But I'd like to get to the writing sample immediately and spend some time writing with some of these pens and some of the other Auroras that I've shown you. One thing for sure, I wanted to show you the comparison of the nib on this pen as compared to the 88, because there is a very distinct difference, and one is just a fine nib, and the other one is really a more flexible type of fine nib. I think you can see the difference. Let me just close up here. The main difference lies in that point, and the fact that the nib here is a little more shaved, giving it the pointy part of that nib is much much thinner, if you will, than what appears on the normal fine. Now, I was hoping to get in this pen exactly the same nib. I didn't have that with me. It was at home, but it's not. It really isn't. Now, for the writing sample, I thought I'd divide my writing samples into two portions rather than do the template writing sample that you're used to. I'm going to take all of my Aurora pens and give you a sense of how they perform on paper. And then we'll take a look at my Optima o Sole Mio and kind of compare it to other Grail pens. I think that's what you're really interested. You want to see how, or at least I want to describe to you what kind of sensation, what kind of writing pleasure I get from the various pens and how I can compare them, etc. So we'll do that in turn, if you will. So let's go to the first part, and that is I wanted to show you how these other Aurora pens perform. This is that beautiful finish, okay, Magellano, I believe it's referred to. Let me just make sure I got that right. I have my notes here. Yeah, Magellano metal pens. And I thought it was a vintage, but I mean, this could be dated somewhat. But they're being sold. They're still being sold. So this is the Aurora Magellano. And, it's a metal, very slim pen. I love that nib. Now, that nib I don't believe is gold. Otherwise, I would have seen an indication on the nib itself. The nib is kind of unique, a little bit stylish. I've seen Montegrappas with similar nibs. One could say similar to what we see with Lamy Safaris, although very different, but very nice. That tipping is very thick, so this may not be a fine. I would say that this pen writes more like a medium, if you will. But the pen is actually very, very pleasant and surprisingly comfortable for a little pen. But if you're looking for a little pen, slim pen, to slip into a pen loop attached to a notebook, like this one, for example, which is kind of too small for a bigger pen. Well, as you could see, it would accommodate a very slim pen like this one. And you know what? I hadn't used this for some time. I have, of course, it comes in the other model as well, but there's probably pens that I will be using in the very near future now. The next pen that I'd like to show you is this Ypsilon. So this is the Ypsilon, and I took this pen with a broad nib, and let me tell you, broad is an understatement. I would almost say that this writes like a double broad, very smooth and juicy. Just for those of you who need or enjoy or like a thicker nibbing, well, you sure got one here. And no complaints about this pen. That's a steel nib. It's not a gold nib, and yet really writes very, very, very nicely. Thank you very much. The next pen is this vintage 88P that I purchased in Rome. So this is the Aurora 88P. It has a little bit of feedback while at the same time having a bit of spring to it. I don't know if you could see that, but if I do the loops, as you could see, I can really get some interesting line variation out of this pen. So this is a very, very interesting offering on the part of Aurora. And I understand that these pens are actually, they've continued to be to sold. So although this may be a vintage version, you can actually find these on their website, if I'm not mistaken, as we speak. And it's also a very nice pen, to say the least. Okay. Similarly, with a similar design, is this steel nib, number 5, Ottonotte Classic, I think they call it. So this is another Aurora Ottantotto, which means 88. Classic, I think that's what they refer it to, if I'm not mistaken. But again, this is a medium nib, so you can see it's not as broad as the Ypsilon, but very smooth. Good writer. It doesn't give up at any time. I haven't inked this Auretta or Auretto, but again, this is probably kind of a student offering, for those students who want to write with a fountain pen. And there you have it. I think it accepts cartridges. And if I'm not mistaken, Aurora does have their own cartridges. And then, of course, you have the subject pen. But before the subject pen, I wanted to look at this Aurora 88 with a classic black design with an ink window, and specifically with that nib that I mentioned to you. And here it is. I mean, this nib has just got a beautiful spring to it. And that's why I think that there's kind of a flex nature to this nib as opposed to my Optima. And I would have preferred, frankly, to have this nib on my Optima, but I was not even aware that it was possible, nor did they, the vendor at the Aurora Boutique, indicate to me that it was, because if it was, I would certainly have gone for this one. I remember trying the extra, the EF and the F, and landed on the F when I purchased the Optima. But folks, this to me is another Grail pen. It's just beautiful, very nice, and kind of models after, the classic black Pilot and Mont Blanc sort of decorative or resin, black resin, if you will. So that's, in a nutshell, my Aurora pens. But let's turn our attention to this beautiful Optima and to see what gives on this. I will write with this pen posted, and of course it is inked up with this Aurora turquoise ink that I purchased at Novelli's in Rome. Having purchased all those Grail pens, I needed some ink, and so I opted for this Aurora turquoise. And this, of course, is the Optima O Sole Mio. And, let me just cut here for just a second. You got to understand the personal attachment I have for this pen is not only because it's a beautiful pen, and it's not only because it's Italian, but because it's called O Sole Mio. Being a Neapolitan, O Sole Mio is one of the the cultural, musical highlights of our beautiful region. That, along with O Sorrento, there's a song after the city where I was born. And you also have to understand that O Sole Mio, my father, at every, put it this way, every major function where family was invited and there was any sort of music, he would get up on the stage and take the microphone, and one of the songs that he would sing would be O Sole Mio. Or Torna Sorrento, the other beautiful song, that I'm very familiar with. So when I see O Sole Mio, it just doesn't only evoke the pen and the beauty of this pen and the beautiful country of mine, but where I was born, but it reminds me of my dad when he would pick up that microphone, and trust me, he would never make a fool of himself. His voice was kind of a tenor voice, and he knew the words, and he would follow the band, and everybody would cheer, and they would give him a standing ovation. So it's personal, all right. So it's difficult for me to criticize this pen. Now, having said that, I would have expected that a pen of this quality and of this price point, especially, that out of the box, that nib would not be problematic, okay? And I got to blame myself as much as I need to blame, Aurora, or even the vendor that sold me this pen at the Aurora Boutique. I mean, she actually, I think I'm going to put maybe some brief, pictures or video. I actually tested the extra fine nib and this very same nib at the store. And I thought it was beautiful. But you know what? Once we left Rome, and then I was on the ship and I was journaling, and I decided to ink up this pen to see what gives, I realized that nib wasn't perfect. It was scratchy at one point. It kind of just gave me, when I was doing this stroke, gave me kind of a scratchy sensation. It was fine coming down, but not fine on the upswing. So when I got back home, I played around with this nib a little bit. I would say to you that it's still not perfect. There's still a little bit of, and it's not pleasant feedback. It's unpleasant feedback, which gives me the sensation of being scratchy, or there's something wrong with the tuning of this nib. Now, I didn't want to go too far. It's a gold nib. It's an expensive pen. You can play around with your nibs when it's a cheap $35 pen, but when it costs you this kind of money, you want to make sure that it probably gets done by somebody who knows what they're doing. So I'm waiting to finally meet up with a nib master, maybe at a show sometime soon, and have this nib looked at and worked at, so that it gives me a little more fine writing than it does presently. I don't know how to describe it. Let me just, and perhaps this is a good opportunity for me to introduce some other Grail pens. And in particular, I would want to look at my Visconti that I recently reviewed. That is, it's got that fine nib. And when I write with this Visconti, it's an even stroke and an even sensation. In other words, yes, there's a little bit of pencil feedback, but it's smooth and it's consistent, whether it's on the upstroke or downstroke side. So whether it's this way, up or down, I'm getting an even writing experience, which unfortunately I'm not getting from this nib. And there must be something, and I've done my best to try to figure it out. I don't want, like I said, I don't want to go any further. I figured I would continue. That's okay. But here and here, it's completely different. I'm not getting the same feel. So something is off. It's still fairly smooth and constant and wet and all the rest of it. So got to give it that. But out of the box, we complain about $35 pens, being garbage because out of the box you got to play with the nib. And well, you know what? It happens to the best of them. So a little bit of a disappointment. But I think I'm the only one to blame. When I tested that nib, I guess I was so excited and so anxious to get it that I didn't really pay attention. It's one thing to be quiet at home, take out your journal and start writing and experimenting with the pen. And it's another, you're in the store, you have 5 minutes to test it. It seemed fine. It wrote fine. It was just inked just a nib. And maybe there was a lot of ink on that nib and it kind of felt smoother than it actually was. Now it's, it's working. The ink is coming from the feed, if you will. So you get the real sensation. But having said that, I should have perhaps tested it better. And I'm sure if I would have told the vendor, look, I think there's something wrong with this nib, she would have either changed it, exchanged it, or even fine-tuned it for me. But having said that, I think the rest is comparable to my Visconti in terms of width and feel. If I compare it to this 823, well, first of all, this pen has a thicker line, but I think it's a comparable feeling. Certainly, it's a comparable to my 1911. Does it have any ink? It may not. Yeah, it doesn't have any ink, but it would be comparable, I think, to the Sailor. In fact, the Sailor, I would venture to say, is probably more tooth, as we know. This is my Omas Vintage Extra. And yes, I would in fact compare it very nicely. Compares, I think, very nicely to this this Omas in terms of sensation. How does it compare to this unique Napoli C? There was 101 that was given to me by Nino Marino. I'll let you know in a second. No. I got to tell you, Nino, you did a great job. In fact, it was his son who tuned this pen for me. Yeah, there's no comparison. I mean, this original gold Delta nib, and I think it's a Bach originally, but the way it's been tuned, it is pretty unique, I got to tell you. Now, I could compare it to my M1000, but it would be unfair. And the reason why it would be unfair is that this nib is just broad and there's no feedback. Now, Shaq saw my last video where I took out this pen and compared it to my Visconti and said, whoa, there's something a little bit too loosey-goosey about that nib. Shaq, I don't think the nib per se is problematic. I think it's just that I chose, this is a broad nib. And as I mentioned to you, one of my replies, and I'm speaking to Shaq directly, hoping that he takes a look at this video. As I mentioned to you, one of my replies, I made a mistake. I should not have taken this pen in hindsight in that broad. But at the time, you have to understand, I was a stub guy and all I ordered was broad, stub, and broad and double broad. In fact, this Legrand is it's either a double broad or even a triple broad. Yeah, I think it's a triple broad, which I regret enormously. So if I had to reorder this Pelikan M1000, it would probably come in fine, because Pelikan, unlike some of the Japanese pens, has very thick line. But I can't say that I totally regret my choice, because it does give me variety. And this juicy pen, I mean, there's a reason why right now, it's at the top along with my Visconti. Maybe not in the future, but right now it is. Now, going back to the subject pen, how does it compare to my 149? Again, Shaq said to me just by looking at the video that he thinks there's something off with this 149. I think it's probably because it wasn't inked properly and it was just running out of ink. Shaq, I don't believe that this Mont Blanc 149 has really anything wrong with it. I think just the writing sample that you saw when I did my Visconti review, the pen was running dry, so because it was running out of ink. I think this pen writes very nicely. It is now I forget if this is a broad or a medium. It's certainly not a fine. So again, it would be unfair to compare it with my present pen, which is the Optima. But, you know, all to say that when compared to my other Grail pens, or so-called, or at least my choices, I don't think this Optima, even with that, you know, questionable pen nib, as anything you know, it's a great pen. It's a great pen, and it can only get better in my view. When compared to my Flex 88, I call it a Flex. It's probably a semi-Flex. Where is it? Where is my Flex 88? Here it is. And I'm almost out of paper here. Yeah, I mean, this nib is very different sensation. You know, like every Flexi nib, you know, I have less control with it, but probably more enjoyment. But the line is very, very similar to the regular fine nib. So there you have it. That's the writing sample I wanted to offer you guys, just to give you a sense of all these pens and where this pen is situated. If I would have to rate the pen in terms of where I would situate my Optima with all my Grail pens, I would, you know, if I give a 10 on 10 to both my Pelican M1000 and my Visconti, at least for the time being, I would say that this Optima would probably get an 8.5. Where does it stand in the scheme of things? I haven't quite decided yet. I think I need more experience with this pen on a daily basis for longer periods of time. And maybe at the end of the year, I will kind of rank all my Grail pens, take them all out, show them to you. And because I've got more that are yet to be reviewed that came from this trip that I would have loved to compare this Optima with, but that I won't. And maybe we'll do it at the end, if you will. So there you have it. I would say it's 8.5 on 10. So that's it for the review, folks. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you appreciated this very personal look at another Grail pen from my Italian Grail pen Odyssey. Beautiful Optima Aurora O Sole Mio. Evokes a lot of personal connections there, if you will. And I think I will cherish this pen for a long, long time. Grazie molto. Statevi bene. Fate attenzione. Enjoy your pens. Please subscribe. If you like this video, just click on that like button and let me know. Send me your comments. Anything you saw. Shaq, let me know what your comments are. I always appreciate them. Thank you very much, folks. Arrivederci, and see you next time.